The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. A big departure from the more serious, darker games of the past. A lot of people were kind of taken aback by the lighthearted visual style of Wind Waker. Over time, I think it's kind of grown on people, and personally, I think it deserves some attention, especially for the fantastic soundtrack spearheaded by composer Kenta Nagata. This week, we are analyzing the title theme of the game. We start off with a few bars of percussion and a single chord just to kind of set the tone here. This is a 9/8 time signature, and this is a standard time signature for jigs, and you'll see it a bunch in Celtic-inspired music. It's kind of like 3/4 time with swung eighths, so you'd count it like 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a... By the way, the fact that we're only using one droning chord is also a very Celtic idea. If you've ever heard bagpipe tunes with a droning harmony, this is kind of like that. The chord being played on what sounds like a lute or a guitar is a 3-note chord containing the notes A flat, D flat, and E flat. I don't have it written down here because this is just the melody, but it's just those 3 notes. The first thing that came to mind was that this was an A flat sus4 chord. And that's the easiest way to write it, but after thinking about it a little bit, I don't think it's an accurate reflection of how the chord functions. Since we're in the key of D flat, and the melody makes this very clear, it would seem odd to have the 5 chord as the only chord in the song. Instead, I see this as a D flat sus2 in second inversion. What second inversion means is that the 5th of the chord is on the bass. Normally, inversions are used to get smoother bass lines, but in this case, since this is the only chord in the song, the inversion is used for a different effect. If you tried to put this chord in root position and keep D flat on the bass, I think the song as a whole would sound very jovial and uplifting. I mean, it already does, but if you were to have this chord in root position, that would be driven home even more. Given how the second inversion is one of the more unstable chord inversions, I feel like this A flat on the bass was specifically added to add a sense of adventure. It's like something feels off, but not necessarily in a bad way. It just sparks your curiosity and leads you to investigate further. That's kind of the impression that I'm getting. And actually, just throw away that whole metaphor because that's kind of exactly what happened. Something felt a little off about this song, so I got curious and I investigated why, and I found out what was going on with this inversion, and I learned something new. So I think both literally and figuratively, this inverted one chord adds that sense of curiosity and adventure. So we just have a few bars of just the percussion and just this chord being played. And we have the beginning of the melody here, and you can just take a listen to that. So that's the full 8 bars of that melody, and then it just repeats again with some extra bagpipe stuff going on. We have a very joyful, bouncing melody here, and most of the notes follow a quarter note, 8th note pattern, which makes this kind of skipping, dancing sound, like a da 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 da, like that. You might also notice that there are no rests in this melody whatsoever. This is also a Celtic inspiration. There are very few rests, and the melody just keeps going and going. One concern to writing a melody like this is that you need to be careful it doesn't sound like a run-on sentence. Otherwise, it's going to bore the listener, and that's no fun for anybody. Using a variety of note durations and rests is important for this to give the melody room to breathe, but because of the Celtic inspirations here, there isn't a lot of room for that. So the way Nagata works around this is by having the melody outline a harmonic progression. Even though there's only one chord in the background, the melody is implying chords of various functions. This is a very good way to write melodies to begin with, just because it makes them strong and memorable, but in a situation like this, it's absolutely essential for retaining a sense of direction. Looking at bar 5 here, we start with a little D flat arpeggio going from A flat up to D flat, and then F, and then climbing down the scale. Starting the A flat on bar 4 over here is a nice way to prime your ears for the melody to begin. And climbing up on this D flat arpeggio removes any doubts your ear might have about this being in the key of D flat. So we've immediately cemented that key. And right here on bar 6, we climb down a G flat chord, and it just plays around with that. And bar 7 implies a flat 7. It's a little more vague than the very clear cut arpeggio here, but the C, A flat, and G act as the third root and seventh of the A flat chord, respectively. Bar 8 resolves this by resolving that C up to D flat. So already, just in this first 4 bars, we've outlined a progression from the 1 chord to the 4 chord to the 5, resolving back to 1. If you try and add a bass line underneath this, you'll see what I mean. One thing I think I ought to point out by now is all the little grace notes being played. Grace notes are very, very short notes that lead into the melody notes, usually just as a form of ornamentation. The specific notes don't affect the melody, so I didn't include them in my score. But they add a nice stylistic effect that's very common in ocarina and whistle parts like this. I want to make one last observation about bar 8, though. Even though it resolves to D flat at the start of the bar, there is a melodic cadence at the end of it. Basically, the melody is implying a cadence at the end of the bar. It sounds unfinished, like the phrase ends, and we move on to the next phrase, but this part does sound unfinished, and it leads, it primes your ear for what's about to happen next. This is part of a longer form called a period. It's basically, we've got this 4-bar melody right here. And this wraps up on a half cadence, which a half cadence is any chord going to the 5 chord. And basically the phrase here ends on the 5 chord. The goal of this phrase is the 5 chord. And but it sounds unfinished, of course, because of the dominant chord, so we have to continue on. So this 4-bar phrase here gets repeated with a few little differences right here in the in bar 11. So here's the first ending, and then over here in the second ending, this is a very clear 5-to-1 cadence with this part right here very clearly outlining the upper notes of a dominant 7th chord before resolving on D flat right here. These cadences are very important because they're acting as punctuation for this run-on sentence in the absence of any real pauses. The half cadence kind of suggests a semicolon to me, if that makes any sense. It's finished part of the phrase, but there's still more to say. And the second ending wraps everything up with a full cadence, letting you know the phrase has been finished. I think this is further punctuated by the fact that the D flat holds out across 2 dotted quarters. It's the longest that any note in the melody is held out, which has some finality to it, in my opinion. Just be aware that there is no functioning harmony in this song because there's only one droning chord. I'm not saying that these are necessarily specific chord progressions. I'm just saying that the melody is strongly implying them. It's what I hear in my head as I listen to this, and it's very strong melody writing, and it means the melody can stand on its own without needing a moving harmony behind it to keep things interested and to keep things moving. So after this part, the melody just repeats again, and just with some bagpipe stuff in the background, and we go on to this B section. And that just repeats that 8-bar pattern repeats again with a second ending, which I'll get to. So the violin takes over for the B section of the melody. It revisits the idea of hanging on this 8 flat before the melody begins. Personally, I think the melody loses some of its harmonic strength here, but it's made up for by including some more clear-cut phrasing. There are longer strings of 8th notes here, but most bars end with a quarter note plus an 8th note, like the here, here, or here. And that keeps a bit of separation between the faster lines. In addition to that, I find this section to be a little less energetic. I think the distances between notes have a lot to do with that. There are fewer arpeggios, and the jumps just aren't as big, so the melody is a lot tamer here. So, despite the loss of harmonic strength here, I would say if I had to assign a harmonic progression to the melody, I'd say the first couple bars are kind of playing around a D flat chord because they keep coming back to D flat and F. Bar 15 contains an E flat minor arpeggio, which I would associate with a 2 chord, which is just E flat minor. And bar 16 implies a dominant chord to me just because it's stressing the E flat and it's kind of the end of this phrase, prolonging the resolution. E flat being the fifth of the dominant chord, of course. A similar idea repeats through bars 17 through 20, where there's a simple ending right here, stressing the root and fifth of the dominant chord. This gets repeated again with a new similar ending, and the song loops back around to the intro. And I'll just show you the ending, the extra ending here. So again, I would say, not to say that there has been a definite harmonic progression throughout any of this, but I would say that when the violin comes in, I think the harmonic progression is lost a little bit. Although it is very clear, like right here in the second ending, just really stressing the A flat and E flat, that this was definitely written to suggest a dominant chord. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the melody in this song is written in such a way as to suggest movement by implying different harmonic ideas and chord movements, which keeps things going and provides a sense of structure to the melody in the absence of any chords in the background. So this little sign here is DC, short for da capo, which just means to, or da capo, I don't know how people pronounce it. I say da capo, and which just means to head back to the beginning of the song and just continue from there. And so that's really it. It's short. It's a great song. I knew as soon as I heard it that I needed to transcribe it, and I thought you guys might enjoy my findings. I know this is a lot of information to cover, and I'm sure some people think that I went a little deep into all this, but that's just it. I don't think Nagata was thinking about all this when writing the song. I think he's such a great composer that all of his training and a good ear led him to compose in this way without really consciously thinking about it. Being aware of these composing techniques will help you to be aware of them in your own writing, and it'll open up new ways to think about it. You have to be careful of being too analytical when composing, or you run the risk of sounding mechanical. Just trust your ears and your musical intuition, because the emotion of the piece transcends any rules that may be standing in the way. When Nagata used that second inversion chord, it goes against all established rules of how chords should work, but he made it work, and what he got from it was some more depth to an already well-written piece. If you want a PDF of this transcription, you can check out the website at ongakuconcept.com. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments section. If you have any questions, you can let me know, and thank you very much for watching.